Hi, and welcome to the You World Order Showcase podcast, where we feature life health transformational coaches and spiritual entrepreneurs stepping up to be the change they seek in the world. I'm your host, Jill Hart, the Coach's Alchemist, on a mission to help coaches and entrepreneurs amplify their voice, monetize their mission, and get visible, leveraging podcasts and the huge audience of the Gnostic TV network. Today, we are chatting with Amanda Johnson. Amanda is a illuminating and empowering speaker, facilitator, and author, co-founder, and CEO of Saved by the Story Publishing. Welcome to the show, Amanda. It's really great to chat with you today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you about story.
Yeah, I can hardly wait. So I'm going to ask you the big question first, and then we'll dive right into what you're doing and how you're doing it. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. So what's the most significant thing, in your opinion, as individuals we can do to make an impact on how the world is going?
I think we need to tell our stories. Oh, I wish I knew that Carl Jung quote by heart, but it was in the vein of if we don't tell our stories, our culture fades.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we need to tell our stories from all of our different perspectives. And then we need to listen to each other and really, because story gives us that opportunity to empathize with other people, to see the places where we are similar more than different. And I think if we could do that, we could change the big story pretty quickly.
Think that too. That's so profound. And in that we all tell ourselves stories all the time, but it's rare that we allow those stories to escape the bounds of our masks and the oh God, I don't want anybody to think badly of me, so I'm going to hide behind the the story that was written for me. It's like we
Mhm.
copied and pasted something on on top of us, and that's not
Or
really who we are.
or some of us, figured out that we don't want that story, so we created a new one, but we're kind of dragging the old one underneath. And so then it gets scary, right? I'm bringing this persona to the world that isn't 100% true. There's all of this other material underneath. So yeah, absolutely. I notice, I witness immediate freedom for people when they start to share the stories that they've been holding inside for too long.
On a personal level, I know that once you accept your story and recognize that you don't have to be the victim in the story, you can shout plot twist and move in a different direction. It doesn't matter how old you are.
Yes, absolutely. I've
There's
worked with people from teens all the way up into their 60s and 70s, and witnessed that same moment of, you know what? I really I recognize, a lot of it is about recognizing your part in the story, right? How you're keeping it up. Sure, it was written for you, but you were given a role to play, and man, you've been really good at that role for your whole life, because how did you know to do anything different? And then as soon as you change a script or change a behavior, things around you have to move. I always use the example of, if you went to your favorite theater production. I love Les Miserables, right? And they have the script, and they have the music, and they have the props, and they have the characters and the positions. If one of those things changed, the whole thing would be sent sideways. And if you're a really good actor and Broadway star, you kind of know what to do to improvise your way back to the script. But if you don't, then things have to change for good. And I really think that that's what we do when we choose a new response. But we have to know what that response that's been getting us in trouble over and over again is first.
and the way uh, we talk about telling a story, but we live our stories as well. And sometimes the stories we tell aren't the same as the stories that we're actually living.
That is so true. It's so true. It's, and with a lot of the folks that I have the opportunity to work with, that is a pain that is repeatedly shared, is that there is the story that they're trying to write in the world, you know, very high performing, very overachieving individuals, award winning, you know, getting the opportunity to make a huge difference in their industry. But when they're not out there performing for other people and making everyone else's lives better, the story that they're living in personally, their health, their relationship, oftentimes they don't even know what it is. Like, where's the pain, right? Because they spend so much of their time giving and serving to others, and yet this other part of them is living this really disempowered and painful story.
You think that it might come from people, because how we behave is often mirrored back to us, that um, it also can be if you change, if you're behaving one way in public, but you're a different way because that's who you fundamentally are at the moment. It's the stories that you tell yourself when no one's listening in your head. It's the way you remember things that happen to you in life, and you're free to remember things any way you want. When I learned that, it was just like, oh, I can just make stuff up. It doesn't matter. I'm the only one that's thinking about this, so I can just make up the ending that I wanted it to be.
Mhm. Yeah. Well,
Because
and
who's
it's
going to
one
tell me
thing,
I'm wrong?
it's one thing to make up an ending, right? Like, I'm here right now, and I want to look forward and write a new story. But it's kind of different when you have the opportunity, you know, the very one of the very first things that I do that makes people wonder why they hired me immediately is ask them to go back into their story. Because, you know, if you have a message to share with the world, I want to know why. And so does your reader, or so do the people in your audience. And so when I ask that why, it brings up that old story, you know, because I came from this and I overcame it. Well, I want to talk about the overcoming, not the thing. I don't. And and so what I find fascinating is that, you know, to your point about memory, you know, our brains are pretty much hardwired to look back and see negative,
Mhm.
right? All that negativity bias and those really hard, painful moments. I don't know why we see those more intensely than we do some of the really beautiful moments in our past, but that's what happens. So when I ask someone to go back, I get all of the, you know, the long timeline of all the things that happened. But as I ask them to go back into those stories and kind of be the character inside of them again, what did it feel like? What were you thinking? What was all that head trash between your ears? What was the story you were telling yourself? What was happening in your body, right? All those character things, they then have to come up and ask, how did I get from this moment as the character to the next moment? And so often I see their eyes get wide when they realize that there was so much magic happening in the mess, that even though all of these things happened, when they get into that, I call it the narrator view, and practice a different level of awareness around their story, they actually do see that things happen differently than how they've been remembering them. You know, when they get into a scene, right, they might get into the scene and remember, okay, what was I, you know, that's the meditation. What was I thinking? What was I feeling? What did that person say? Because I have to write dialogue in here to help people really connect with me. And son of a gun, if they don't have moments where they realize, like, oh, that's what they said to me, that kind of changes the way I feel about that moment all of a sudden. But the story I wrote from inside that moment, very different than what actually happened. So, in some ways, I think it's about looking back and trying to find the real story, you know, the magic in addition to the mess, the grace in addition to the grit, the, you know, the beauty in addition to the pain, because that whole story kind of gives us a truer picture of our identity as, you know, the actual hero of the story. We're still standing. We're still trying, you know, we're still trying to do better.
There's still more coming because
Hmm.
there's going to be another minute until there's not.
Exactly.
So we continually write our stories. I like the idea of going back and remembering as a meditation the event. And and trying to look at it from a different perspective rather than being, um, because I look at events that happen in life, and I think that no two people experience an event the exact same way, and they don't remember it the same way, even if they were the only two people there. There's, and if you can go back and sit in it and try to be the other person, or just be an outsider looking in and not having the so much of the emotional part of it, or do you want them to keep the emotional part of it?
I think the emotional piece, if you can manage to empathize with all of the characters, I
Mhm.
think there's really some power in there. In fact, as you're sharing, I was thinking, um, about 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to start working on this project with this gentleman he's a second language learner, lived in America for 25 years, really proficient verbally, but his writing, oh, amazing story. The outline made me cry with no scene development, no character development. I mean, it was beautiful. But making sure that all of the sentences are constructed properly, and then bringing the storytelling to another level.
Mhm.
And part of it was that, really pressing what's the character thinking here, and what are the other characters in the scene expressing, right? Because you can't really get inside their heads, but you can notice their posture, and you can notice the expressions on their faces, and the amount of uh, intimacy that he was able to build between the characters, and then the characters and the reader was just phenomenal. And then we got to this one chapter, and he didn't have time to work on it. He was like, I don't know what is happening in my life right now, but I cannot, like, I can't go there. And it was a make or break chapter. I mean, it was a make or break scene. It was one of those, like, if we miss it, the whole saga goes off the rails. And he said, I'll get back to it. I don't know when, or maybe you can work your Amanda magic. And I thought, I don't know if I can do that. Let me try. And so I sat there, and I kid you not, the scene that he wrote was almost an exact replica of a scene that happened to me when I was 7. Different characters,
Mhm.
different motivations, maybe, different setting, but this similar sort of experience with a parent and a child making a decision that changes their trajectory forever. And there was this moment where, as I was writing from all of those characters, I was not just the child who was harmed, I was the parent who's the main character of the story doing his darndest to change a generational narrative. And then I was the other character who was just watching from the sidelines and didn't even know what to possibly do. And so I had this moment where I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what if my dad, maybe this was the actual best thing that he had? Maybe this was the best thing. You know how we always say that to ourselves? They did the best they could with what they had. And some of
And
us
it
really
doesn't
believe it.
help.
Some of us really believe it up here, right? And it can give us
Mhm.
a certain amount of freedom of, like, trying to empathize. But it is a completely different thing when you're inside of a scene, really considering the heart and the motivations of a human who is may have their back up against the wall, and they have to make a decision that's the best that's possible, but it's really horrible for the people around them. If that's what happened. Now, I don't know. I don't know if that was his heart, but the fact that it cracked open that possibility, that what if question, it I could feel it change me at a cellular level. I actually had to go to bed for 3 days after working on that chapter, because I could feel it changing me at this essential level, this identity that was formed because of that moment. The story I told myself about my role in the family, my role in the culture, my role, all of these different places.
All the
So,
watershed moments in your life that everything else stems from that one moment. I don't know if everybody knows what that moment is, but I suspect that most people do.
Yeah. I think we have several of them. I mean, working with people and kind of working, dragging through their old backstories,
Mhm.
there are those pivotal moments, and I think there's more than one of them. Um, I know for me, as soon as that 7-year-old one was healed.
Hey all, I'm Jill Hart. We all know that legal matters can be costly and stressful. Finding the right representation and dealing with high retainers and hourly bills adds up fast. But what if I told you there was a way to have legal insurance, just like your health or auto insurance? Well, Legal Shield has leveled that playing field. From just $29.95 a month, you get access to lawyers for personal legal matters, from traffic tickets to real estate issues or even trust matters. Help is just a tap away on your phone. Call or text 435-764-0875 and use the code JILLLEGAL or start your journey to legal protection today.
In that strange narrative moment, the 4-year-old came up. I mean, right behind. It was like, oh, okay, there's one that needs the attention. And so, I don't know how many there are for different people, but they do. They form these stories that story formed everything. It formed the way that I married my husband, that I had decided to partner with him, and the foundation of our marriage. It was absolutely one of the most important factors in building my business. When that healing happened, everything in my business changed without me making any decisions about it. It was like my business went, all right, it's done. Good. This is what I was here for. Fantastic. See ya. And I was like, what? But I had to come to grips with that, because I built that from that identity. So if that identity didn't exist in that way anymore, then neither did my business.
Did it help your business?
It will. It will. I can't imagine being able to support people from this more whole space than, I mean, what I was able to accomplish in my business, supporting other people, the healing that I was able to witness. I know that it was all beautiful, and it was also all kinds of tinged with that identity and that lens. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to the next cohort and seeing how things are different, because I know my experience of myself and the work is totally different.
So the storytelling that you do, it's I'm not gonna say it's life coaching, but it is life coaching.
Kind of.
Is it more about teaching people how to write a story? And are we talking books? Are we talking just scenes? Are we talking like for businesses? I mean, we tell stories in businesses, foundational stories and why we do what we do stories and all kinds of storytelling is the way we relate to people
Mhm.
overall. So, I mean, what is your coaching specifically around? I mean, so,
Yeah, so most people find me at Save by Story because they have been inspired to put a story into the world. It's either
okay.
some sort of nonfiction book or a novel, or maybe they need help, getting ready for a stage, translating what their content is on the page and onto the stage, building curriculum, those sorts of things. They're looking for some sort of help with content and delivery with the storytelling. And so I really thought that's all I was going to be doing. I'm just going to help people get the right characters, get the right organization, get the right stories and lessons in the right places. And then I had my very first retreat, because I learned that I had to kidnap people to get them to tell their stories. Like these really busy professionals, I was like, I need you here for 3 days, because this whole, I'll see you in 3 months thing isn't going to work for me or you. And so the very first retreat, when I asked them to start sharing their stories, there was such a tremendous amount of breakthrough. And then when that final lady hit the ground in a bucket of tears, I heard that voice say, this is actually the thing that you're supposed to be doing. Like, the books are going to come, the messages are going to change lives, but your job is to help people get back to who they were before that story happened. And I thought, I'm not sure I know how to do that. I was only planning on this. So, you know, you learn. You learn and you draw on all of the different skills and tools that, fortunately looking back, I had a lot of psychology, a teaching degree. I knew how to organize things. I'd been in a facilitation program. So all of the things quickly alchemized into something that worked. But man, it's not what I
Super
wanted.
powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I, this life transformational,
It really
that
is.
kind of work, that intensely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I've been amazed. And over the years, at the beginning, a lot of people would come, I'm not sure I want to tell my story, but I want to write this book. Well, you kind of have to tell your story in a way to write the book and make it powerful. And so when they were getting ready to get into that process, you could feel them, like the resistance, because like, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to look. Okay. So we had to find other ways to do that. And, I had a novelist show up a few times over the years, and I would always be able to improve their project and help them. But I never worked with people from the beginning in fiction for until like maybe a decade into the business. And that was something else because, a part of my understanding about my work was there's other work to be done in addition to the writing, right? This personal work. And so I warned people, like, I've never done this before from the beginning, so I don't know. Oh my gosh, the things that happened. I mean, surprisingly, and maybe not surprisingly, fiction gives people an even easier, less resistant route to showing themselves things that are hiding in their psyche or hiding in stories in their lives because they're writing through characters. And so, yeah, one of the very first projects, I was watching the characters show up on her page thinking, oh no, those look a lot like the characters she's telling me are keeping her from getting the writing done in her personal life. Like, oh no. And then, I'd set the stage. Maybe this is personal. Maybe this is why you haven't been able to do this. Oh no, 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 no. I brought it up for 18 months with that one client, trying to help her to see how these stories that she was writing were exact mirrors for the stories she was telling in the breakthrough circle. She didn't feel safe enough to look at that story yet. And so through series of magical events, things that happened at work, therapists that walked into her life, all these different things, she had a moment where she contacted me and said, why didn't you tell me that I was writing my life? And I said, I absolutely tried like 100 times in the last 18 months. You just weren't ready because that story was a horrible, awful story to have to look at. And, I really believe that people need to build the internal safety to be able to look at those things and not be crushed by them. And so that's what we did. We waited 18 months and then she woke up to what was happening, completely changed her life over the next 18 months, and is living a story that she didn't think was possible when she met me.
That's so powerful. Just, yeah.
And I mean, it has nothing, I don't want to say it has nothing to do with me because I worked with her and I witnessed it. But the point is, like, when you really interact with your own story at any level, there's so much opportunity for transformation and change, but you really do need that amount of safety. And she kind of had to build it from the outside in. She had to be in a retreat circle with a bunch of people that she could accidentally blurt out this big secret and then, you know wonder if she could come back and have the rest of the circle just witness her with all of this love and compassion and, how can we support you? I mean, it was a completely different experience than what her story would have dictated before. And so we began to rewrite that story of safety just around her until she started to realize, oh, I can be safe. I can take this outside of this circle and take the safety with me and change the narrative out there.
Wow. And and so now you just do retreats, or do you still do
I
online
do
coaching?
all of, I mean, the program after almost 2 decades of running it, it's pretty robust. We work with people for about a year, people who really want to write a book and do it well. And we have quarterly retreats. And during those retreats, they're 7-day retreats. 3 days wasn't enough. The first 3 days we spend working on the story, meaning what's the story that's keeping you from writing the story. And so we have 3 days of story driven, story saving work. And that's really beautiful. It's really intensive. And then we take a day off and we get to integrate and maybe go to the spa or whatever we're nearby at the time, and just be in community. And then we have 3 days of the writing. Like, okay, everything is cleared out for now. Let's, move forward and get into the actual writing process. And then, that piece of safety and partnership, it translates also over to time. Very busy professionals, like, when am I going to write a book? Like, it's crazy to try to fit it into their lives. And so I realized, the retreats are very important. And then we have, monthly events where they can hop on and just write and raise their hand when they get stuck and get in a breakout room and get unstuck and get back into the momentum. And so people are pretty much finishing their content in I would say like 6 to 9 months is a good first draft.
Interesting. And so you have some resources for people where it doesn't really matter where they are in the process. Do you want
Nope.
to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So if you go to savebystory.house, you'll notice that we have a map there that kind of shows the journey from we call it inspiration to impact. Inspiration is like, oh, I have this idea for a book, but I don't know what to do with it. Right. And then they get into a lot of movement, really exciting. Have you ever written a book? Like, that moment where you're just downloading a whole bunch of things that you want to go in there. And then you look at all the things and you kind of go upside down because you're like, I have no idea how all of this clicks together. I kind of feel it inside, but I don't see it out there. Right. And that's the part where we say, that's where we need the safety. We need safety and structure. We need safety and allies. And so all throughout this process, get to the end of the manuscript and then you think, well, it doesn't magically turn into a printed book. There's a whole other journey of, right, the editing process and putting it in front of readers and getting feedback and possibly building a brand and then figuring out how you're going to scale that message in the world if that's something you want to do. So on that page at savebystory.house/foreshadows, FORE shadows. And you can kind of see what piques your interest there. There's some content there for people who are feeling like they had a really clear message and then all of a sudden it disappeared. A bunch of questions that will help you get clarity again. People who are really wanting to shift a story, like, how do I'm in this painful story loop. How do I start to crack this thing? There's a video and some other guiding tools to help people get started with that. Things about publishing if they're getting ready for that. So they can just kind of take a look and see what they're interested in and download what's useful.
Oh, I love that. And you have another website, the dash story dash oracle.com. And what is that website about?
So Save by Story is a place where a lot of individuals come to do this sort of work, right? To get their stories out into the world. And as a byproduct, they figure out how to save their own stories and then take that back into their lives. After enough of those happening and that narrative healing that happened for me a few years back, I realized I needed to take it out to other communities and industries. And so the Story Oracle is my personal brand, speaking and facilitation, where I go out and help communities, therapeutic communities, mental health, these sorts of spaces, education. I'm, talking to parents and educators about how to use storytelling to connect with young people and to build character and resilience, like some of my favorite things to do. So that's kind of, I'm taking it out to the world through the story article.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Amanda. This has been an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
I'm so glad. Yes, I enjoyed it too.
And thanks to you all for joining us today. And if you'd like to learn more about Amanda Johnson and her storytelling process, you can go and visit savedbythestory.house/foreshadows, FORESHADOWS, and we will make sure we put that link in the show notes below. Thank you all for tuning in with us today. If you have a podcast or are interested in starting one to get your message in front of our huge and active audience, be sure to reach out to us at jill@gnostictv.com. We love to help spiritual entrepreneurs and coaches amplify their voice and monetize their mission, and offer a variety of ways to do this on the Gnostic TV network platform. Join us for our next episode as we share what others are doing to raise the global frequency. And remember, change begins with you. You have all the power to change the world. Get started today and get visible.